Hello, Mile High Champions. It's me, your commissioner. And guess who? It's Nolski. How are you, Noel?
I am well, sort of. I'm not as I don't think I'm as tired or as loopy, which means I'm probably even worse than the past 2 weeks. So let's see how this goes.
Awesome. I'm happy to hear you're not your-ish this time. I felt bad last week. You're like, wah, wah. I'm like, no, don't be sad. No, be glad. Like the bags. Okay, let's move on. MVT award goes to Molly, 5 second chug. She kind of killed Brandon this week.
Indeed.
182 to 74. Yeah, big week for her. On the back of Duke Johnson with 55 points, who also happens to be the MVP. So that's always nice. And that's very common. We talked about that. MVP, MVT tend to be on the same team. However, if you look across this week, there were many 50-point games. Drew Brees on some Drew Brees, Josh's team, 51.8. Molly's Duke Johnson, as we mentioned. LaShawn McCoy on the Rams, 52 points. Castle Black Knights Watch, which I'm sorry to say, Noel, you had Lamar Miller with 50 points, and still Ben was able to pull off that 155 score. That's not fun. And then Odell Beckham Jr. had 49 points. It was just a high-scoring week. So congratulations, Molly, on the MVT and MVP award. More money for you. All right, Noel, who's a shithead?
Okay, so this was a hard one this week. If you based my text messages to Mike, or based the shit of the week off my text messages to Mike during the first half of the Texans game, it would totally have been Bill O'Brien. But I got over that. And so moving on, this is kind of, I would say, the shithead of the week is Roger Goodell, but let's not focus on him as much as on Mark Davis, who, to call him a shithead of the week was kind of an understatement, because if you just do a quick Google of him, for those of you who aren't familiar with him, it literally looks like someone took a shit on his head.
It does.
And he drives something like 500 miles each way to get that goddamn haircut.
That's amazing.
He's had the same haircut since college. So there's that. But mainly it's the fact that, this is kind of why I've drug Goodell into this, is the Nevada Assembly voted through a funding bill that gives the Raiders a new stadium if they move to Las Vegas. It's ridiculous. I think something like 1.3 or 1.4 billion dollars is how much the stadium is going to cost, and half that's picked up by the public, which is fantastic. And kind of why I'm giving this more to Davis than Goodell. The NFL has, while they're still kind of openly doing these money grabs and trying to get these lucrative stadium deals for which it's only meant for rich people. Like, if you look at what the amenities they build in these new stadiums, it's all about luxury and just things that most of us will never be able to afford. But, we're kind of an afterthought at this point in the NFL, which we'll get to later. And so what the NFL is trying to do is go, all right, calm down, guys. Let's try and make it look like we're not openly doing money grabs or land grabs. But Mark Davis has now said a bunch of shitty things about Oakland, saying that they didn't negotiate in good faith. They disrespected him. The NFL is trying to say, cool it. We'll talk to Oakland a little bit more. He's saying, fuck that. We're not doing that. Screw Oakland. And this is also dumb, is this is moving a team from the 6th largest television market to the 27th largest television market, all for the idea that he might make more money off of fancy new options at this 1.37, I believe, billion-dollar stadium. So good job, Mark Davis. I hope it was good PF Chang's for you to hold court at, as well as another thing you should look up is he drives a van, which I believe is from the mid-'90s, which has a VCR in it still.
Wow, that's not even a little bit molesty.
Yeah.
Actually,
and then there's the hair.
Molesty. The hair is the best part. You know what? I'm going to post a picture on the main page of his hair, and
it does it.
It justifies why we make fun of him just for his hair alone. You'd be like, I don't know who this guy is. If you just looked at a picture, be like, I'm going to guess this guy's a complete fuck. I don't like him. I don't like his hair. I hope he crashes his 1990 Chevy whatever Astro van with a VCR player into a mountain, and then that
has
mountain
I think
explodes.
vanity plates. It's like Raider something on it as well. It's just fantastically bad.
That's amazing. You know, if I owned the Oakland Raiders, I don't fault him for wanting to leave Oakland. It's not a great place. I mean, if you go up into the hills, maybe. I think the dude just wants to party. It's evident by his hair. I mean, it's not even like a mullet where it's business on the top, party in the back. It's just all party. Well, if it was 1979, but it's still a party. So we'll love it.
Unfortunately for him, a lot of the NFL owners, have other businesses that make them a fair amount of money. Mark Davis, obviously inherited this team, and this is the only way he has to make money. Unfortunately for him, he's in an area where they're not so willing to just throw tax money at billionaires. And I don't even know if he is a billionaire. He doesn't have a lot of money. So he's going, everyone else is getting it. Why can't I? It's just that the hair. Let's just go with the hair. That's the only reason why he's the shit of the week.
Shit hair of the week.
Shit
that
hair
guy. All right. Thank you, Noam. I agree with you. He could be shithead of the millennium, as far as I'm concerned. He's just a douchebag. Let's go on to the reviews. This was a week that helped define the playoff pictures, which is going to be part of the poll. But if you look at the way everything is shaping up, there are some clear winners and some clear losers at this point. Yes, there are a handful of 3-3 teams. Yes, there are a couple 4-2, but we have a 5-1. Ben is way ahead of the pack at this point, and unfortunately, we have 2 1-5s. However, if you think about it this way, if you're 1-5 still, you can still have a winning season. We have 6 games left in this season, and on average, if you can win 7 or 8 games this year, you'll make the playoffs. Now, Noel and Courtney unfortunately have the 1-5 seasons. They would have to do a hell of a run to get to the playoffs. And thank you for the sad trombone, Noel. They'd have to do a heck of a run to make the playoffs, but I am eternally bullish. I am eternally optimistic, and I do think that is possible. So I'm going to be cheering for the underdogs. That's the American tale. Not just Fievel, who is also a badass, and he went west one time. I don't know if you knew that. All right, let's go to the first review of the week, which is the Spartans against 5 Second Chug. We talked about how Molly dominated Brandon, which I'm sorry, Brandon. I know you listen to this podcast, but I get a perverse pleasure from watching you lose like this, not just because you're in my division, but because you're just so goddamn good at this. You're so good at fantasy football that it's like watching, Mike Tyson go down. It's like watching the Patriots lose. It's like watching the Yankees lose. You're just like, the dynasties, or Alabama football, that when they lose, it's like, oh, okay, there is some justice. So I'm sorry to bathe in your misery, Brandon, but that's again, like last week, I'm speaking from the heart. So he had a real tough week. Julius Thomas got him 4. Arian Foster was the most disappointing, got him 3. This was just, I think we were expecting better things from that. But as Nolan and I were saying prior to this podcast, if he had been on anybody's team, Jay Ajayi of the Dolphins would have been the MVP hands down. In fact, he would have been one of the best best all time. He scored 65 points this week. That clearly took away from Arian Foster's score of 3. So rough week for Brandon when he has 4 single-digit games, and Ryan Tannehill. Well, he's very Ryan Tannehill-ish. So not too much to expect there. Molly had a great week. I mean, David Johnson, I think I said Duke Johnson earlier. David Johnson with 55 points really carried her team, but then she also scored a lot with Terrence West, who, bravo, that was an unexpected play. Now, granted, he's been doing well enough to take a flex position, but at the last 3 weeks, 32, 21, 36, that's a great pickup. That was well played by Molly. She did a really good job there, 36 points. The Panthers D, that sucks, because who would have thought that they're 1-5 too. They've completely crumbled after the Super Bowl. And then Hunter Henry, again, a great pick from San Diego. You normally think of Gates as the number 1 tight end there, but this Hunter Henry's really emerged as a solid tight end for Phillip Rivers to throw to. So congratulations, Molly. Great week for you. She advances to tied for second in the Atlantic Conference at 4-2 with her fiance Josh, as Ben is still the dominant player there, 5-1. let's go to my game. Let's go to my game. Noel, take it from here. I can't talk.
Well, you have this going for you as opposed to Brandon, who I didn't believe me when would believe him when Brandon sent me a text message on Sunday going, you're going to win this weekend. I said, fuck no. And he's like, well, at least your game was close. And I hadn't looked at the scoreboard, and I was like, why? He's like, I'm losing by over 100. Or he did at that point. He said he could lose by over 100. So he was prophetic at that point. So, this wasn't a bad week for you, Mhcl. Again, your kicker is 12 points in the grand scheme of things isn't great, but from a fucking kicker,
I'll take it.
love of God, he's just killing it. Then your defense, 21 points. I know you're not a huge fan of holding on to multiple defenses, but you looked smart for hanging on to them during the bye week. And then it was really just kind of a tale of mediocrity for you in the main part of your roster, with the exception of Tom Brady, who, dear God, does he look mad? And shouldn't he be mad? He's just coming out and killing people. And Patriots, and I don't know if you ever watched it, but Ben Affleck, who appeared to be drunk, was on Bill Simmons' new HBO show this summer, and they could have just gone with the whole, all NFL fans tend to agree that Goodell just went ape shit for no reason, and he should have let it go, but he couldn't. He couldn't. But what do? They just put to everyone else fucking hates Boston because we're the best fans ever. Like, it was just sorry to ramble on, but that was just dumb. I was reading about this today. What the hell happened to Jordan Howard? He was on track to be the guy, and I don't know if he got hurt, but now there's was Kareem Carey stealing carries and targets from him. Jordy Nelson, Packers just sucked.
Sorry for interrupting you. No, I wanted to interject on Jordan Howard. I was watching that game because they were playing against Jacksonville, so I got to watch two players, Jordan Howard and Allen Robinson. Both disappoint me. They're like the stepchildren I never had. Kadeem Carey kept coming in, and I didn't have my screen up at the time. I was like, wait, whoa, what happened to Jordan Howard? He was the guy, and now I'm like, shit, he must have gotten hurt. So I was scanning through, and he was healthy. I was like, okay. Normally, when you pull a guy like Steve Slayton, for example, it's because they're fumbling the ball like crazy, and it just wasn't the case. I guess John Fox, in his infinite amazing wisdom, was like, Jordan Howard's doing really well. I think I'm going to put in Kadeem Carey instead and lose a game, and now we're going to be 1-5. How do I still have a job? I don't know. I'm John Fox. Actually, be more like, I don't know. I have a job in Chicago. I'm John Fox. Anyway, so that's my frustrated bit on Jordan Howard. Yeah, I don't know, Noel, to answer your question. I don't know what happened with him. He just kind of fell off a cliff this week.
But another solid week from Greg Olson. Let's skip over your flex position here. Really, Tom Brady was just more points to kind of keep up with just Drew Brees, who is on fire, and he's playing against also just some terrible defenses. Carolina, once again, looked extremely bad for letting Norman walk for nothing in the offseason because they didn't want to pay him. They have – I don't even know who their corners are. They're both rookies, and they cut one of them. They've hired someone else. He can't do anything. That was bad. Frank Gore had a good game. I'd say a great game considering he's, I believe, 33 at this point.
Let's go with 33.
And I read this too, that the Colts had, I think, went the longest without a 100-yard rusher, but they broke the record, then unbroke it on a loss, and then broke it again, regaining those yards back. So that's a pretty dumb way to achieve a record, but good for him. DeAndre Hopkins, I don't know if you guys watched the game on Sunday nights. They had a great graphic that showed just how bad Osweiler has been when he's trying to force the ball into Hopkins. I believe he's thrown more interceptions trying to get the ball to Hopkins than he has touchdowns. Connect on well under 50% of the attempts towards him. And this is why I was so mad at O'Brien, is because I get it. You want to try and get one of your best Hopkins the ball more, but everything has to work. And if you just keep trying to force something that's not working, that's the definition of insanity. And he seems insane. Yeah, we talked about in the recap of the last game. Antonio Gates is back healthy, but 3 points. He'll probably fluctuate back a little bit more, but that has to be worrisome with Henry getting those. Is it Hunter or Henry? He's a rookie, I believe. Anyways,
Hunter Henry.
And I didn't watch the game, but we should look this up. Did Carlos Hyde possibly get hurt in that game against Buffalo? Because it seems like towards the end of the game, I know they were down a lot, but I remember on the Gamecast just not seeing his name a lot. Like someone I believe named like Mike Davis was getting the ball.
Yes, he did get hurt.
Sad. He's such a talented player. It's just, we'll talk about this later, but he's a bigger back, and those guys tend to take a lot of shots to the legs, and that'll keep you out of games, and they'll unfortunately shorten careers as well. So let's hope the best for him. But yeah, this was I think tighter than the score shows, and it's a good game by both you guys here. Yeah, and both defenses scored surprisingly well as well. So congratulations, good win, Josh and Mike. Better luck next week.
Thanks, Noel. And yes, congratulations, Josh. That was a win is a win, as I always say. To quote the great Vin Diesel, it doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. A win's a win. I'm bald.
But what if he can't act?
He's a great... I can't finish that. All right, let's go on to Vanessa versus Larson. Vanessa's fallen on some really hard times here. She's 2-4, and she shouldn't be. And here's why. I'm not saying this because she's my sister, because I am a highly competitive person. And as humble as I try to be when I play, I want to win all the time. So I'm looking at her thing from a competitor standpoint. She has the second most points for in the league, minus the number one player right now, Ben, who's just crushing it at 931. She has 849 points for. That is 141 points per week. That is awesome. That is like that's enough to get you not just the winner's circle, but it might take you to the championship. What's killing her? She happens to play teams that just have great weeks. She has 977 points against this week, or excuse me, this week. That would suck. Over 6 games, which means 162.8 points against on average per week. So on average per week, she's playing against teams that are having awesome, amazing, great weeks. So she's having a hard time. Now, I always like to find the silver lining. Silver lining here is that if you're putting up 141 points, eventually you're going to start winning, and eventually the luck of these other teams is going to run out. So 2-4 with 6 games left, that's more than enough to make the playoffs here. Let's talk about this game. It was a close one, 135-131. Both teams had some great players, but the standout far and away is LaShawn McCoy with 52 points for Larson's team. It's easy to say that no problem that he won this game for him. However, it might have been a Pyrrhic victory because he's out. He hurt himself. He did not practice today due to a tight hamstring, and I don't know if he's going to be able to make it this weekend. So although Larson won this week, it might have been at the cost of his star running back, who through the 6 games is the number 3 running back, averaging 33 points a week. That's quarterback territory. So it kind of sucks for that. Vanessa, let me just finish up with Larson here. He had a pretty good week otherwise. He had a couple teens, 2 single-digit games from Willie Snead and Martellus Bennett. That's not too bad, but it was made up by a good game by Jarvis Landry. I guess the most disappointing thing here would be Derek Carr, who he snagged off the list. Larson's got a great track record of stealing players that you and I want, Noel. I had Derek Carr for a long time, and I tried to pick him up, and he snagged him. He just happened to snag him on a down week, though, against KC. I think Derek Carr will come back. Derek Carr's got a big arm. He can complete a lot of passes. The only downside is he's a little interception prone. He tends to throw, more often than not, 50-50, he'll throw an interception a game. So On Vanessa's side, she had a great week. It was much more balanced. She had 5 players that scored double digits and only 3 that scored single digits. And the single digits were 8, 6, and 8. So that's not too bad, especially since one of them was Travis Kelce. What really sucks is Antonio Brown, because Noel and I were texting on Sunday. Big Ben went down. And when Big Ben goes down, Antonio Brown loses a lot of value. He went from scoring 28, 22, and 27 points to 8. So when Ben Roethlisberger's out, which he's very likely to miss the next 4 to 6 weeks, Antonio Brown goes from being the number 1 wide receiver, which he is right now, to most likely, I would say, top 10, or maybe even top 12. So he's still starter worthy in the wide receiver 1 position, but not the dominant wide receiver. Who's the backup for the Steelers, Noel?
Landry Jones.
Okay, there you go. So I know he's
so
not
well. Last year he got hurt that the team went out and signed Michael Vick.
Okay. I was gonna say he's not that bad, but yeah, that's pretty bad. So sorry, Vinny. The loss of Antonio Brown it's going to make the climb you have to make to get to the playoffs a little steeper. But it is Antonio Brown. He's very, very talented. He could even pass the ball. He did it last year, so you never know. So congratulations to Larson on your win. You are tied in the Mountain Conference, my conference, in first place with Brandon, followed by me at 3-3, and Courtney, as we talked about, 1-5. Vanny, you are number 3 in the Pacific Conference, which is the light conference, as we talked about. Chuck and Canfield, eternal lovers, are 3-3 apiece. You're 2-4, and Noel, I'm sorry to say again, 1-5. So there's plenty of the Pacific Conference. Believe it or not, I think is going to be the hardest one, the hardest fought, because the teams are so close. The farthest spread you have is 2 games between Charlie and Canfield at 3-3, and you, Noel, at 1-5. Compare that to the Atlantic Conference, where there's a 3-game spread between 5-1 and 2-4. And there's a 3-game spread in the Mountain Conference between the Rams and the Spartans at 4-2 and Courtney at 1-5. So believe it or not, even though the Pacific Conference isn't full of winning teams, it's going to be, I think, the hardest fought this year. So good luck, Vanessa. You're in a tough conference. All right, moving on. Let's move on to the next game, which is your game, Noel. I'm going to take this so you don't have to analyze your own team, which I don't want to make you cry. Noel, I mean, come on. Like, what the fuck? Listeners, specifically asked Noel to help me with this podcast because A, I respect him, and B, he's a tremendous football mind. He knows more about football than anybody else I know. However, that does not seem to be translating into fantasy production this year for you, Noel. And I can't say it's because of any specific reason other than some of your players are just underperforming expectations. You have plenty of points. You have 700 plus points. That's fine. You're scoring over 100 on average, 100 points per week. Your points against, as you alluded to in the last podcast, aren't that bad. It's the second best in the league. The only person that's had fewer points scored against them is Mhcl. What's biting you in the ass? Excuse me. There's 2. Mhcl and Canfield are below you, and then you're third there. What's biting you in the ass is like Lamar Miller. I mean, yes, he had 50 points this week, but he had 5 last week. Emmanuel Sanders had 8 this week, and before he had 15, 22, and 35. Le'Veon Bell, now you know that, I mean, the first 3 weeks that sucked having him. He's got 40, 30, 23. That's not bad, but it's not, especially with Big Ben out, that's just disappointing. I think that you have a great team here, Noel. It's just the problem is they're not consistently performing up to their standards. With 135, you did have a shit hand this week. You got dealt a real tough play because Ben scored 155 points. Any other week, I would say we would have beaten at least half of the league with 134, but it's just tough luck. And you know what? I maybe make a sacrifice. Maybe find like a pigeon or something and rip its head off and drink the blood or whatever the fantasy gods demand of you. Do it.
If I can interject, though, I did, and I told Ben this earlier, that I like Ben's team, and I don't want to jinx Ben. And I'm sorry, Ben, if this might do it, but his response was, "Thank you. I hope I can make a run," because I know how it is to start off hot and fizzle, and I like Ben's team. I wasn't very confident going into this week, and I'm not really surprised that the scores that got put up by Ben's team. I like just about every player he started.
Ben does have a stacked team. I will say that. We were talking about Ben and I were texting this weekend as well, and he has a really damn good team. I think that he will be first in his conference. I think he'll have no problem making the playoffs. But to your point, the fizzling is really important. Ben had a great team last year. He went 9-3 and made the playoffs. And unfortunately, he made it as far as third place, which isn't bad. But you got to be consistent throughout the entire league, through the entire season, I should say. Just to make the playoffs or make the Colorado Bowl and win it. So yeah, hopefully he won't for his sake, but he does have a great team. It'll be fun to watch how Ben does. He only has one loss this year, so keep trucking Ben. And same thing to you, Noel. Being in the Pacific Conference, like I said, you still have a great shot at least making the playoffs. I mean, as long as you can win the Pacific Conference, that's fine. That's all you need. So tough loss, Noel. I'm sorry. Congratulations, Ben, on a solid win. And let's go to Courtney and Kenfield.
All right. And in this game, I should mention as well that I should take the blame for you saying Duke Johnson was the MVP, because before we started recording, I was the one that said Duke Johnson, not David Johnson. So you're probably just we're referring to that. So that's on
God damn it, Noel.
But moving on, this game really was defined by Odell Beckham Jr. If he doesn't make just that's ridiculous. 8 receptions for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I believe the majority of those came on maybe 2 or 3 catches, those yardage. Like, it was just big play touchdowns. Like, I think there's one for 63 yards. That's and it's not that Baltimore's defense was necessarily good, but they had been ranked, I believe, decently high. Some of that based on who they played so far this season, but still, you didn't expect that. And for Courtney, 18 points from Todd Gurley isn't bad, but he still just isn't living up to the billing that he got even before last season. Last season he was a stash him for 4 games until he's fully healthy, and they're going to let him go. And that proved to be right. And he just 18 points is kind of, Rashad Jennings territory. It's plug and play, and you go with that, but it's not star, and that's what Todd Gurley is, and that's what Courtney paid for him, is that kind of cash. And then, just unfortunately for her, apart from Tyrod Taylor and Todd Gurley, the meat of her roster was single digits. Demaryius Thomas, Jason Witten, Tevin Coleman, which that was surprising. I mean, I know they're playing Seattle, but in weeks past, they played some decent defenses, and Tevin Coleman had even gotten points backing up or spelling. Oh, no, what's his face? Oh, I'm getting loopy here.
Devonta Freeman.
Thank you, Devonta Freeman. So that was super surprising. Dustin Hopkins, good play, solid play. I think depending on the matchup, he's one of the best kickers for fantasy, because the Redskins are just garbage in the offensive red zone, and so they're just going to kick it. And then Cardinals defense, special teams, but unfortunately, just all of those single digits just cost her. So even though Phillip Rivers had a relatively down game, and Duke Johnson, the actual Duke Johnson, not David Johnson, had a decent game with 18 points. Again, Johnson should not be scoring as many points as Todd Gurley, especially playing against a suspect Detroit defense. We've already mentioned Odell Beckham Jr. Gary Barnidge, he won't go away. He just keeps putting up points on a garbage – sorry to say garbage so much – Browns defense. And here's what hurts me as a Packers fan is that Eddie Lacy, who I was hoping was kind of coming on, only active running back on the Packers roster for last week's game. Let that sink in for a second.
Ouch.
They only dressed one running back. However, they dressed a fullback who they rarely use. That's silly. And now he's out for probably Lacey's out for 3 to 4 weeks. This is just insane.
Should Mike McCarthy keep his job?
I don't want to give into craziness yet. We'll see how they end the season. I remember they lost a terrible game against the Redskins of all teams. So this team can get streaky, which I hate as a football fan, but it happens. So we'll see this week. If they lose to the Bears, I think we'll all start talking about that a little bit more. Other than that, though, that as I said, Courtney got great production from her kicker and her defense, and Kenfield did not. However, simply because of that 49 points from Odell Beckham Jr. and all of those single-digit production from Courtney's team, this one goes to Kenfield. Not to downgrade anything you're doing there, Kenfield. This is a great win. Every win's a good win, even if they're ugly. But as my basement buddy at 1-5, I feel for Courtney here.
Yeah, rough week, especially with the. If I can interject one little final comment here. It was a tale of if you look at her bench, she had a lot of points on the bench, which just sucks. Which I can't say I would have done it any differently. I thought she actually picked the right team. It just hurts when you have so many points on your bench that just are unproductive. So, sorry, Courtney. Congratulations to Kenfield. And let's move on to the last one, Tyler and Charlie. Take it away, Noel.
All right. So the very first thing that sticks out is Ben Roethlisberger, who had surgery on Monday to repair torn meniscus in his left knee, which apparently wasn't that bad. There are some people saying he might be out as little as 2 weeks, which I highly doubt. I would imagine this is probably a 4-week injury, even with him being he's an insane guy who plays through injuries. But 4 weeks, any of you who ever had knee injuries, they're not fun, and he does move around as big as he is. So that's something to watch for. One of the things I should have, you can't, looking at their, the rankings, the stats, there's still one thing you can't really lock into as a football fan is that the Steelers were poised for a loss here. They every once in a while just do this where they have these great games and you think, oh my gosh, they're unstoppable. Then they go on the road and just kind of go, meh. And that was what seemed to happen this week. The offense couldn't stay on the field. The defense couldn't get off the field. And a very poor performance from Roethlisberger, 13.8 points. He threw some just heartbreaking interceptions. He got hurt. And then I will never pronounce his name right. He said Ajay, right, Mike?
Let's go with that. I actually have no idea.
He just absolutely led the Steelers' defense. And that was I didn't bring that up, but that was part of what killed Kenfield or his defense is the Steelers' defense had looked so good, and all of a sudden they just looked like a sieve last week. This one was pretty ugly, I would say, for both teams. Apart from Julio Jones, and then for Charlie's team, and again, we're seeing some decent points for kickers, and that maligned Ravens defense even got him 10 points. That's not bad, but this will certainly be a week for Tyler, who I'm just surprised Tyler's 2-4. Since he's come to the league, he's been fairly consistently. Has he made the playoffs every year? I would be surprised if he hadn't. He's been good. He's been very good. I'll look into that. Hold, please. But, as where with my roster, I've been unable to get really solid production out of my wide receiver or tight end. Tyler has just been struggling to find anybody who he can plug into play at running back and can do anything for him. As we said before the season, we don't know what to expect out of Philadelphia backfield at all, and that showed again on Sunday. And that's going to be another problem playing against the best defense in the NFL, which is the Vikings defense. I hate to say it, but it's true. Next week, Edelman
They're good.
has just seemed to fall off a cliff. Delaney Walker, he must have had a play called back because I thought he got more than one catch for 21 yards based on watching the fantasy cast. Mari Cooper starting to come back. I think it'll be better going forward because now teams are not targeting him as much. That since Crabtree just start the season, Marvin Jones got some looks in that game, had a couple big drops. So that's, I think he can come back from that. But I understand the matchup play with the Lions playing the Rams, but no, that Lions defense is bad. So hopefully he drops them and does something else go forward. But this is one where I would have expected more, really from both teams. But I think Kenfield should be. I just noticed too he has Crabtree on his team. Kenfield does. So I expect to bounce back from Aaron Rodgers. I expect to bounce back from Corral. Julio Jones, 8 points is a decent floor for him because he's just so talented. Gronkowski as he gets more healthy. Other than that, though, I think, unfortunately, and this isn't a critique of either owner, but I think unfortunately they might have some holes to fill.
Yes, and back to thank you for holding. To Tyler, he has been in the playoffs 2010, 2011, missed them 2012, missed them 2013, missed them 2014, made it in 2015. So he's about 50-50 making the playoffs.
Which is good.
That's pretty damn good. Okay, Noel, thank you. Let's go to the previews, which, let's see. The bye weeks, just to inform our listeners, are Carolina and Dallas, which is actually pretty fantasy heavy. There's a lot of quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends on both teams that people are playing. So Carolina and Dallas. Next week is going to be a big one for bye weeks. So we'll just make sure to notify what the hell? Shit. I'm just going to say, pay attention to your team. And the other thing is
do the stuff.
Yeah, do the things, but it's huge. So also the trade deadline is tomorrow. So if by the time this airs, you should have already put in all of your trades. I made a point of that last week. I'm going to send out an email, but if you have any trades, do them now because you're not going to be able to do them after this starts. Preview time. Noel, you're playing Brandon this week, and I'm going to say I think you guys are pretty fucking even. Brandon has been on the decline. For the last 4 weeks, he has scored less points than the previous week. Now, granted, last week really blew for him. But that's not the level you want to see. If you look at over the last 6 weeks, there's a clear delineation down. Yours is a little bit more flat, but slightly, ever so slightly tilted up. The things that will dictate whether or not you or he win is both of your starting wide receivers. And I don't think it's because Emmanuel Sanders would be out. I think it's because T.Y. Hilton would be out. He is number 5 overall. He's putting up about 19 points a week. He's projected to get 20, but if he doesn't play, well, you can't score if you don't play. And unfortunately, I don't think Brandon really has a backup there. Maybe you could put Fitzy in, I suppose, but Fitzgerald's going against the 4th-ranked Seattle defense. He maybe be able to get what's his name? T.Y. Hilton could get. However, the one player I think that he could stack in there that might just blow everything to complete pot would be Ajayi. I guess we'll go for that as the pronunciation of his name. Ajayi.
I have no idea.
J-E?
He had one great game last season, too. That's why, no one knows him. It's like, he's the next. Oh, he doesn't do anything else again. So we don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's his score prior to this week 0, 7, 11, 9, 14, and then 65. So, in the prior 4 weeks, he had scored less points by a pretty wide margin versus last week of 65 points. So, if he stacks him in there, throws AJ Green to the wide receiver position. I could see that he could definitely come back and win this one. Given records, the easy pick would be Brandon, just to say, because Kirk Cousins is doing well. CJ Anderson will probably do better with Simeon back. Julius Thomas, they're actually getting a little bit more action there in Jacksonville to their tight ends. So it's easy to pick Brandon. I'm going to go out on a limb and pick Mhcl this week because even though Brandon lost this week, so the fantasy gods kind of are saying, well, okay, maybe Brandon deserves a win this week. You more so, Noel, deserve and need a win to keep going. So I'm going to say Mhcl are the victor of this week.
Appreciate that. For my own 2 cents, though, I think AJ Green is set to have one of his feast games against just the horrible, horrible Cleveland defense.
Could be. Yeah, he's such feast or famine.
But I know they have, what is his face? Crap. Sorry, I told you I'm not as loopy, but sort of loopy. Pro Bowl cornerback, but the rest of their secondary is just god awful. So I think I think this is a good week for AJ Green for Brandon.
Could be. Yeah, I had AJ Green years ago, and that's actually when he was fairly consistent. But he is boom bust to the extreme, and so yeah, you never know. He could have one of those months. He had an okay game last week, but not so much. I don't know. You never know. Let's pick up the pace a little bit. Maverick just farted, and it smells horrible. Horrible. He's actually at my feet right now on his bed, and oh my God, it might kill me. So if you hear a loud thud, I've died because Marvin the dog, Maverick, the black dog at my feet has farted and it's killing me. So let's go on to my game, Noel.
Alrighty. So again, wow, look at the line of this one, just about as close as mine and Brandon's. Just to go across the board here, I think this could be a shootout between the quarterbacks because, as we said, Cleveland's defense awful, Pittsburgh's secondary awful. They're going to try and feed both probably Le'Veon Bell and what's his? I'm so sorry, I'm not very well tonight, but pink-haired running back.
Oh, D'Angelo Williams.
D'Angelo Williams, thank you. They're going to try and feed both of them the ball to keep the ball out of Landry Jones' hands, but they still probably get a lot of first downs. So I like Tom Brady putting up big yards. I like Andy Dalton putting up big yards. David Johnson is just going to get the ball. I don't care that Seattle's defense is very, very good. David Johnson is going to run the ball. He's going to catch the ball. Points. Jordan Howard, I think that could be problematic. We'll see. Believe it or not, Green Bay's defense against their run has been actually quite good. Played Ezekiel Elliott last week, who's just insane. Also, their offense was shitty, so they couldn't get off the field. But that could be. I know, Mike, you'll look at that. Deshaun Jackson, who they say is questionable here against a porous. Actually, that's kind of interesting. Although Detroit's defense is porous, they got kind of shown last week that against bigger receivers, they have problems. Deshaun Jackson is fast, but he's small. So that'll be something to watch. I like a bounce back week for Jordy Nelson, please God. His name is Hunter Henry. Who knows? Cameron Brate, I had him for 1 week, Mike. I didn't even know his name. I was like, what? Cameron Brate? Who did he play? Whatever, he is high ranking. I know you're just using him for the bye week because you have just stud tight end Greg Olsen. And San Francisco has a shitty defense, so we'll see. Mike Evans should get more targets now with Vincent Jackson being the IR. Allen Robinson is, I know you hate him because he keeps going up and down.
Yep.
And then just, I think this game is going to basically come down to whatever quarterback has the better game because I think Minnesota will win against the Eagles, but I don't think it'll be a high-scoring affair. So I think your defense will be good. I see Vinatieri possibly putting up a fair amount of field goals against the Tennessee defense that they give up yards, but don't give a lot of points. So I think that's good for you. Man, looking at this, I'm going to give this one to you, Mike, right now.
Yes.
Just because I think that Deshaun Jackson and Hunter Henry, and I think, oddly enough, Mike Evans might have down weeks. Also, Terrence West, the only good thing that the Jets defense has is their defensive line. So he's going to have a rough time. But I think this one, I'd be surprised if either of you score 130. I think this will be a shootout between your quarterbacks and then just kind of a slug match between everybody else.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I actually think Molly might have the edge this week. I think that I would love to win, but what makes me say that, Noel, not to disagree with you, but I just realized that Adam Vinatieri has just a kiss less points per week than Allen Robinson, and I'm fighting back tears right now. So let's go on before I start bawling my eyes out to Josh versus Vanny. It's difficult. This is one of those times where it's difficult to analyze because Vanny has Dak Prescott and Cole Beasley of the Cowboys on bye, so the line is way off in Josh's favor. Not way off, but 10 points is enough. She's only projected to get 101 points this week, which nope. I'd be surprised given that she's been averaging 141 points this over the last 6 weeks. So she's got a lot to like on her team. She could easily throw Matt Ryan in there against the 25th ranked San Diego fucking Chargers, who kicked our asses but are normally not that great. She's got Stephon Diggs she can throw in there if he actually plays, or even put in Kyle Rudolph. He's been getting, low wide receiver 2 type numbers at 12 points a week. Certainly not bad. I'm going to make fun of her because I just realized she has 2 kickers on her team. However, you are more than welcome to make fun of me because whenever Adam Vinatieri goes on bye, I'm stashing him on my bench because he's 13 points from a kicker, ain't too shabby. So looking at everything, I think they have a fairly okay recording. Vanessa has a little bit easier defensively matchup, but because Josh is facing 4 top 10 defenses, including DeAndre Hopkins, going against the number 1 rated Denver pass defense. I think the problem for him is Hyde, to your point, is questionable, and from what I've been hearing in the news is he's not going to play. And then Matt Forte being questionable. He's also been on a big slide the last 3 weeks, really kind of falling off. He was limited in practice on today, Wednesday, with a hurt knee. So I don't know about him. He might have to rely on Andrew Luck to keep just bombing out the points here. So this week, I'm going to give the game, in my opinion, to Vanessa. I think with the way she's been scoring points, the way that everything's been going for her, she has a better likelihood of winning this week. And that's my logical response. Last week was emotional. Today, I'm going to go a little bit more logical. I think Vanessa has a better opportunity, higher probability of winning, given everything that I see here. Anything you want to comment on, Noel, or should we go to Ben and Courtney?
Let's move on to Ben and Courtney.
Let's duke it then. All right, Ben, Courtney, Noel, what do you think?
I hate to say it because Courtney and I are basement buddies and we're fellow NFC North fans. I can't not see Ben winning this game. Stafford up against a bad Washington defense. Mark Ingram up against a pretty good KC. However, he benefits from having Drew Brees just lighting everyone up. So he'll get passes for short yards. He'll get a lot of runs because everyone's afraid of what Brees is going to do. Also, this is where if Ben would have switched out one of his flex players last week, even though he beat me, he would have fucking killed me last week if he played Brandon Cooks because he is so fast and just so explosive. And while it's not the same because Casey's defense is not as shitty as Carolina's, he's just that big of a threat. I mean, what did he have, like a 90-something yard touchdown at week 1?
Yeah, he's pretty awesome.
He's just unreal. Alshon Jeffrey, he made me eat my words last week. He nearly had 100 yards, even with Brian Hoyer as his fucking quarterback. And now he plays against a Green Bay defense that is without both of their starting cornerbacks and without their starting strong safety. So Pitta is just a reliable tight end, blunt, plug and play kind of player. Jerick McKinnon can be kind of streaky. However, what I like with Ben this week is, Miami's after 2 weeks of being made fun of, Miami came back last week and showed everyone that they're okay. So I think that this week will be a good week for them to be just completely put on their ass by a Bills defense that is invigorated. They've also had an easy schedule, but Miami sucks. So I like that as well. Tyrod Taylor, I think, also is due for a good game because Miami's defense will probably regress a bit. For everyone's sake, especially Courtney's, Todd Gurley has to do something. Demaryius Thomas, I like all Broncos players on offense coming back this week because Gary Kubiak, who I hope is healthy, is apparently going to be back with the team after some migraines. And he's much better at making offensive adjustments than his coaching staff is without him there. So I think they'll figure that out. We'll see who Courtney goes with the tight end. I can tell you by being crappy at tight end myself, I'm finding a hard time finding players to put in there that actually do anything. Mhcl, I had him last season, and I wouldn't even say he's feast or famine. He's acceptable or shit. And I think that kind of defines his season so far this year. I look for a bounce back by Tevin Coleman because I think that the Chargers really amped up their game against the Broncos because they wanted to beat the division opponent. I don't think they'll give us much of a shit about Atlanta. Cardinals defense, I don't know what to think because they're pretty terrible offenses recently. And even though Russell Wilson didn't get great points last week, he looks like he's kind of back to what he once was. So I think they'll keep building off of that. But Hopkins against Detroit, I like that play a lot. So I think this will be closer than the line, but I still like what Ben is doing here. Yeah. But come on, Todd Gurley, do something. Please.
Yeah, seriously. What the fuck is his deal this year?
It's not really his fault. The line sucks, and the offensive coordinator is pretty bland.
That's true. I wanted him so bad coming into the season. Bad league coming into the season. I really was prepared to throw down for him, and but I'm just disappointed in the way Todd Gurley has performed this year. Even though he's not on my team, I want to watch Todd Gurley perform well. It's like watching Adrian Peterson when you're like, God, he's so good. That's what Todd Gurley should be, and maybe in a couple of years he will be. But yeah, it's just sad. All right, thank you, Noel. Let's go to the final game. Charlie and Kenfield, the two lovers. It's kind of hilarious if you look at the preview. Charlie has all of the check marks.
This is insane.
It's amazing. And now, granted, Eddie Lacy is technically out, but okay, who's Kenfield going to put in his place? Right now, he only has 3 out of the 4 players on his bench. One of them is a quarterback, so he can either sub in Doug Baldwin, which would make sense, or Jimmy Graham, a tight end. That does not make sense. So, Kenfield's got a tough road to hoe to beat Charlie, which he needs to do. Whoever wins this game is going to be in a good position because not only do they get the win, they're going to get a win against the division opponent, which puts them even that much further ahead. Now, Kenfield's been on the streak lately, though. He's won the last 3 games, so he's got the hot hand. However, Charlie, with a line of 46 points, even if he throws in Doug Baldwin, who's supposed to his projections 13 points. Okay, so then the line goes from 46 to 33. That's still a great line for Charlie. All of that aside, because this is Effentard, let's not forget that. All that aside, I do think that Charlie's going to win, and that's just from looking at both of their teams. If you look at how both of their teams have been scoring and averaging, and especially with Gronk and Brady finally clicking, I think that it's going to go to Charlie. I would be surprised if Kenfield wins this week. There's just not enough firepower there to really gave him a boost. So that's Charlie and Kenfield. And I realized I lied. That's not the last game. The last game is actually Tyler and Larson. Take it away, Noel.
All right. Another, I know 11.4 isn't the closest line, but I think this is another close game. Blake Bortles against an Oakland defense that has been surprisingly bad, against Marcus Mariota, who's been surprisingly decent, against an Indianapolis defense that's been unsurprisingly bad. That one, I think you got a toss-up right there. I don't know if I trust that either one really has the edge there. Christine Mhcl, who I think benefited last week because the team desperately wanted in the Seahawks to get the running back going. I like him this week. However, I don't like LaShawn McCoy because, as you said, he's out. He hasn't been practicing. This is kind of the story of LaShawn McCoy. He's so explosive and he's such a great athlete, but if you overuse him, he gets hurt. And everyone gets hurt in football. It's football. So, that if he does play, I think they'll probably try and limit his touches. So I give that edge to Christine Mhcl. Amari Cooper has been coming back, but I avoided Cameron Meredith last week because he kind of looked like a flash in the pan, but he's getting lots of targets and he's maximizing on those. So, I honestly think that's a toss-up there. Tight end is so hard to judge because Delaney Walker seems to be kind of a big play tight end, which isn't usually a thing, but kind of the case. Martellus Bennett, I think the position ranking is a little bit skewed because he had that, 3-touchdown game. So that's going to kind of stilt the average a little bit. Other than that, though, as much as if I looked at Tyler's team, obviously, after the draft, and I liked it. It seems, unfortunately for him, inconsistent, disappointing, especially from Edelman's standpoint. He should just be eating up PPR points, and he isn't. But I still, looking at this game, man, I was about to try and give it to Tyler, but I have a hard time doing so. But I'm going to do it because while I like jar cases, that Buffalo defense is, when they're playing against mediocre teams, is legit. And I think Miami is due to get burned after sniffing their own farts after beating a team that was due for a beating after sniffing their own farts in the Steelers. So, it's no enviable task for Larson to watch and see what LaShawn McCoy is going to do. I think he always manages his teams well. But, man, I'm going to actually give this one a too close to call rating because even though the line is 11.4, there's just so many variables. And, I think that, also with the Vikings defense, they can pressure quarterbacks. And the Vikings right tackle, who I believe his name is Lane Johnson, after being able to stay in some games while appealing his suspension for PEDs, his appeal was denied, and he is now out, and that offense hasn't been the same without him. So, I'm going to just be bland as hell and call this one even.
Boom shakalaka, even. That's all right. That's all right. Sounds. I agree with you. That's a tough one to call here. Let's move on to the poll and then the final huddle up with Big Nolski here. And the poll this week is about the playoffs. Playoffs? Who said anything about playoffs? I'm asking you. Do you think you'll make the? Do you think you'll make the playoffs this year? It's yes, perhaps, or nope. So go ahead and vote there if you so desire. And we're moving on to the final thing, the huddle up with Big Nolski. And this one is about injuries because we've certainly seen plenty of them this year as we have in past years. But this year it seems to be quite a few. We're going to talk about common football injuries. So when you hear about them, when your own players suffer them, you'll be able to know, okay, that's only a sprained ankle, so he'll be back in a week or two. Or, oh no, he tore his ACL. Goodbye to him. So let's talk about football injuries, Noel. I have 8 here I want to go over. But first off, I know since you've played football, you've suffered injuries of your own. What injuries, football related, have you gone through?
And this is kind of funny. I only played organized football up until the age of 13. But in that time, I have had more ankle sprains on both ankles I can remember. I've had multiple broken bones in each foot, so metatarsals. I have a pinky that's never healed quite right from being not only fractured but dislocated, and the socket actually doesn't work right. This wasn't necessarily football related, but I have a shoulder that's trashed from weightlifting. And then my knees are just generally sore because of I've got tendonitis in both of them, which has been basically I don't want to say it's football related, but traced back to athletics from my teenage years. As I was telling Mike before we record this podcast, I am lucky enough that I never had concussions during football games. I had concussions playing baseball, basketball. I got hit in a 2x4 with the head when I was a kid, which isn't as funny as it sounds, because I was hit by a neighborhood boy who was 14 when I was 4, and then I was knocked out also by I shouldn't laugh at this. An older boy was trying to impress my sister at church camp when I was 7, and headbutted me and broke my nose and knocked me out. I had a concussion from that. And I also had one from falling on my ass. But I've never had one from football, which is lucky for me. I should point out, though, that I have had a football injury from non-organized football from tackling Brandon when we were I think 13 or 14 in a spirited game of Smear the Queer in Pat DeVries' front yard when I tackled Brandon and he extended his elbow and I fell on top of him and cracked 3 ribs. That was fun.
Oh, God. Ow. You know what? I wonder if future generations are going to be like, how ignorant were they when they said something like smear the queer? It seems a little bit backwards now. But that was a long time. That was 20 years ago. Because
the game makes no sense. I think what we did was just try and tackle whoever had the ball, and that was the whole point. There was no way to actually win the game other than just hurt each other.
Yeah, that's the point of smear the queer. It's just it's really just whoever has the ball tackle him. It's more rugby-ish than football. And also, let's go back to the comment about the fact that a guy's like, you know what women love? To watch me headbutting people and making them cry and bleed. Awesome. I'm a caveman. Wham! And then he hits you. And what was Corey going to be like, I love you. That's so great. You just headbutted him. You're like Zinedine Zidane, even though I don't know who that is, because that doesn't happen for another 10, 15 years. It's like Back to the Future. See the future right now.
Especially Zinedine Zidane for you, Corey.
Yeah, for a 14-year-old guy, that's hot. Zinedine Zidane, in case you forgot, was the French soccer player who headbutted an Italian soccer player in the World Cup and was famous for that, among other things. So, anyways, that's Noel's history of injuries in the NFL, in football. I have a notable football injury. I didn't play football growing up. I just happened to love the sport. I threw a football into a tree once and hit myself in the face. And so I didn't actually suffer any permanent damage or any sort of actual injury, but it sucked. And at least it was funny. So the big one that I wanted, the big A, it was legendary because it's one of those things where if you just, all right, I entreat all of you to go grab a football, face a tree, not a big one, not like an oak that's been around in Wash Park for 100 years. Go to an ash tree that's not too big. Throw a football at it and see if you can have it bounce off and hit you in the face. I bet you could stand there for an hour and not have that happen. It'll bounce to the left. It'll bounce to the right. It'll go over your head. It'll land at your feet, but not hit you in the face. I did this on my first and only throw, and it was awesome. After the fact, not so much during the fact, but after the fact, it was awesome. So let's
And that tree is actually still there if anyone wants to try it out.
Okay, so the tree's in Noel's dad's front yard. If you'd like the address, let's not tell him. By the way, let's just have you go there and throw footballs at his tree. He'll love that, and we'll go.
He'd be so confused.
Like, God damn it, Noel! All right, so the 8 injuries I want to talk about: ACL and MCL are the first two. ACL is the anterior cruciate ligament. That is the inside part of a ligament that holds your knee together. That is very commonly injured when people get hit from the front or the rear, and that typically takes them out for the whole season. That's really something you want to avoid. Well, injuries in general are something you want to avoid, but that one that really fucks you up because the heel of the inside of your knee takes a very long time. The second one there is the MCL, the medial collateral ligament, is on the outside. And that's from when, like, a running back is cutting to the outside, a linebacker comes and blazes them from the side, and it just stretches it out and tears it. That's really a bad thing. So the ACL is on the inside of the knee, the MCL is on the outside of the knee. ACL gets hurt from when you're running forward and backwards. You get hit from forward to backwards. MCL is typically from when you get hit from the side. Another common knee injury is a torn meniscus, which is the cartilage in between your two bones there in your knee, and that usually happens when, let's say, a guy like Adrian Peterson is making a cut for the A gap, which you should know about from last week's podcast. When you're hitting the A gap, you plant your feet and then you get hit. So your foot is completely stationary, and somebody grabs you and twists you, and so your knee gets twisted on itself essentially, and you tear your meniscus there. That's number 3. The remaining 5, an ankle sprain or strain that happens commonly just because it's a very physical running sport. It's not like tennis. Well, tennis you run a lot as well, but you're not really running forward and back, or just more side to side. That happens a lot. Ankle sprains and strains happen quite a bit, and it's mostly with running backs and wide receivers because there's the ones that are pivoting, they're changing directions, they're putting weight on one leg before they cut to another way. So ankle sprains and strains are common, but they're not as devastating as like an ACL, MCL type thing. Anything in the knee is just rough. Muscle contusions, that's what happens when, say, a guy runs a helmet into your thigh. That's just going to hurt like hell. It may not take you out for long, but imagine trying to run after a guy like Von Miller has planted the crown of his helmet into your thigh. It's going to hurt, and you're going to hesitate subconsciously to put a lot of pressure on that leg, is you're just not going to want to endure that pain. So muscle contusions are not common enough to keep people out. You're not going to see like, LaShawn McCoy is out because he has a muscle contusion. It's like, no, LaShawn McCoy is out because a defensive end blasted his helmet into his knee and he has an MCL injury. That's more common. Another one is a hamstring. This happens a lot with wide receivers. And the hamstring is the back of and the lower part of your leg. It's the back. And that happens just because especially with wide receivers, you have to make quick cuts. You have to make plays where you have bursts of speed. And it's not uncommon to just have your foot planted and you just push a little too hard and you tear your muscle. This certainly happens. The last two happen with quarterbacks more than anything else. Shoulder tendonitis, which is just basically overuse, repetitive motion, that just happens for a lot of quarterbacks. It's usually not enough to take them out of a game, but you can tell when a quarterback is really pussyfooting it and they're just not willing to make big, powerful throws. It may not be because of a tendonitis diagnosis, but you can kind of tell when after a quarterback like Trevor Siemian 2 weeks ago slammed into the ground by the Bucs. That took him out of the game, but had he actually stayed in, you probably could have seen him really gingerly throwing the ball just because that type of pain. While it's not tendonitis, the outcome is the same. Tendonitis is going to be more common among Phillip Rivers, who's a crybaby, or Tom Brady. They're just older players, and so they've been throwing the ball for so long, they're going to have that repetitive type motion. And then finally, which is what happened to, Tony Romo, sort of happened to Trevor Siemian. Many other quarterbacks, because the defensive players love to just not slam into the ground, but slam into the ground and just bury them into the ground, which is shoulder separation and dislocation, which happens like what happened to Trevor Siemian, although he was kind of fairly lucky. He got off with only a week out. When you get slammed to the ground, this happens to Big Ben a lot because he takes big hits. When you get slammed to the ground, that's going to just ruin your shoulder. And if it pops out and you can't get it back in, I think it was Lethal Weapon 4, where almost said Mel Brooks, definitely not Mel Brooks. Mel Gibson is slamming his shoulder into a pipe to try to get it back in. Doesn't feel good, and it's not going to do well, especially if that's the arm you throw with. How the hell are you going to throw if your shoulder's separated? So ACL, those are the 8. ACL, MCL, torn meniscus, ankle sprains and strains, muscle contusions, torn hamstrings, shoulder tendonitis, and shoulder separation or dislocation. I will post the article from which I found that, so you can read a little bit more if you want it to. But those are the big ones that you see more often than not in fantasy football, because they're the ones that most affect offensive players. Now, the defensive players, they obviously get hurt as well, but these are the ones you're going to see more often than not when you're building your team and deciding which players to play. So that's what I wanted to cover on injuries. Noel, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yes, actually, so part of why ACLs and MCL tears are so bad is that those don't actually heal on their own. They have to be surgically repaired. They're not going to, like, the tissue isn't going to reconnect itself. And that's why, those injuries used to be career enders. Think of Gale Sayers. Watch some early tape of him where he was just, I don't even know if there's really if there's comparison in modern football. But Gale Sayers was just unbelievable. Think of, if you've ever watched film or highlights of Barry Sanders, but combine that with someone with blazing speed who could also hit people. It's, in a way, it's like watching Jim Brown combined with Barry Sanders and still something better in Gale Sayers. He was, he got a surgery to try and fix it, but he was never the same. So that's why now when players are able to come back, it's so unreal. And as far as, like, I have a fairly large cartilage tear on my shoulder, which, came from bad form while lifting weights. In case any of you are wondering, lifting 300 plus pounds for reps on the bench press is not really a good idea, especially if you have bad form. Your shoulder isn't designed to do that. So lift for fitness, lift for flexibility. Don't try and get gigantic muscles, because as I was never huge, but my shoulders did not appreciate trying to hoist at one point 375 pounds up. So I can't imagine what there's guys that lift like 600 pounds can do. But that's why injuries are so bad, because for the most part, they just don't heal. Sprains will heal, but tears don't. If it's torn off the bone, it's probably not going to reattach. Broken bones heal. And then finally, when you're talking about contusions, those are so freaking common. Like, I remember the first time that I played organized football, tackle football, that is, when I was in 4th grade. I also bruise easily. I would show up to class with just arms completely covered in bruises, to the point where the teacher would notice that I had a bruise from the day before that seemed to be covered by a new bruise, or a bruise that was made through a mesh practice jersey, and you could see it. And this is what I did mention as far as injuries go. Bruised tendons, which don't tend to keep players out but hurt like hell. I remember getting a helmet to the knee one time and couldn't figure out what happened. My dad later said that, they hit you right in the tendon. It's bruised now. So there's nothing damaged. It's just really painful. And as much as I like watching football and like football, it is a sport that will it fucks you up no matter what you do.
It's safe to say that my son Lincoln will never play football, except for in a purely recreational sense. And it's not a knock on anyone playing football. It's certainly because Courtney and I know that sort of stuff happens. So we're going to try to keep him from that. The other thing I didn't mention, which is a little obvious and on the nose, which is concussions. Obviously, that's when your head or your brain actually hits the inside of your skull and can cause some damage, or in the worst case, it could cause internal bleeding. And if you don't treat it properly, which is why the NFL is taking it so seriously now, then you can actually go into a coma if you don't treat a concussion properly. So concussions make a lot of sense. It's a little obvious and on the nose that that's obviously one of the bigger injuries that happen in the NFL. And it hurts so much. You viscerally feel when like a quarterback, running back, anybody, you see them hit their head on the turf and their like neck kind of snaps back and they hit it's hard to watch. But concussions are another big one. But that's you should. Most people know what a concussion is, and they really didn't feel the need to cover that. So, okay, Noel, I think we have done it. We have I don't know if it's record long, but it's certainly a good length one here. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we conclude this evening?
I think I'm good. Sorry for rambling on for so long, and once again being loopy as hell.
Noel, you never need to apologize. I want to, as I'm going to every week, as I've had nauseum said by now, I am going to thank you for being a part of this podcast and for being part of this. I appreciate all you listening, and I hope you guys had some fun with us tonight. Whenever you're listening to this, if you're on your way to work, on your way home from work, if you're just listening to it sitting at home, whatever you're doing, I hope we brought a little bit of cheer and smile to your day, and then I hope you continue to listen to us. So, Noel, thank you very much for being with us tonight. I appreciate it, and we will talk to you all next week. Goodbye, everyone.
Go Broncos!
Hooray!